Antonio, it's really nice to see you here at KPMG's Latin American Conference in Mexico City. Nice to see you.
Hi, Lars. Nice to be here and thank you for inviting me.
So you're a partner with KPMG in Chile. And I know there's a lot of discussion about Chile here because Chile over the last, 10 years or so has had a lot of tax law changes. Give me your perspective on that.
Yeah, that's a really good approach. In fact, if we have seen Chile for the last, let's say, 40 years, the first 30 years were fairly calm in terms of our tax system. There were some tax increase in corporate tax, but the system was, let's say, logic and reasonable, and everyone was accustomed to it. However, due to some economic restraints, we had an earthquake and other issues in terms of our development as a country. The government, let's say in 2010, they started with reforms. Our governments have 4-year terms, and we had like every 2 years a reform. So each government had 2 reforms at least, or at least they try to have 2 reforms per period. So this was good in a way because we were evolving. We had some OECD rules come into place, CFC, FinCap rules in a better way, transfer pricing, which was a huge step forward from our perspective. However, due to this constant tax reform, the complexity of our system and the logic has been difficult to manage because the system has become every day more complex, but also you may have a rule that was stated by law and should become effective in 3 years, and another bill comes on year 2 and it changed the bill, the law that should start on year 3. So that's now challenging, not only for us as an advisor, but for our clients, because they have to be always trying to accustomed to constant change, which is part of the new economy. Change is always happening. But at the end, if we want to ensure investors a long-term investment, we do need to make sure what are the rules they're going to play with it. What is the soccer field that they're playing with?
I'm not talking football with someone from Chile, but it must make it very difficult for clients or taxpayers in general trying to navigate this if every 2 years or so there's a new set of rules to grapple with.
Yeah, it has been difficult, and it's something that is not only happening in Chile, but compliance and the requirements for taxpayers or for clients to comply with information to the tax authorities has become quite burdensome, sometimes even a little bit overwhelming, let's say, because there's a lot of filing and information. However, that information is good. It's how the sale needs to be reported and how the Chilean IRS is receiving it, the key issue there, because we want everything to be fairly compliant and to ensure that our clients are complying with the law and also are complying with their obligations as part of the society and investors in Chile. However, sometimes the rules are so complex that even if they're all the willingness or all the motivation to comply, they may not be able to do so. So that's something that hopefully will be worked in the future, and I think there is an environment to do so. However, having year by year reforms or a discussion on tax reform or not thinking for the next 30-40 years makes it hard at the end for someone who is doing an investment, let's say in the mining sector, which are long-term investment, or in lithium, which is something Chile is now pushing very hard. They're thinking of 40 years, 50 years, so they need to know they have some sort of regularity or logic or reasonability in the tax rules, not only tax, environmental, corporate, everything, but in our matter, tax. So.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, right? I mean, you're only going to invest if you've got a reasonable amount of confidence that you know what you're getting into.
Yeah, that's right.
So let's look backwards a little, perhaps the last reform or the last reform before that. What impact have these reforms generally had?
Yeah, for example, we had a big bill of law proposed by the current government that had some very valuable things. For example, it did align our transfer pricing a little bit more with the OECD in terms of transfer pricing adjustments. However, there were other matters that were so massive and they sort of made our corporate income tax and individual tax or dividend taxation quite complex, where we had a mixture of non-integrated system, such as the US, together with a system of an integrated system, which we had for taxpayers that could be doing exactly the same activity. So you had two competitors, let's say, that could be subject to different regimes because of where they came from or how they're structured or who are their shareholders. And that, I believe, is not the idea of a tax system. The tax system should be neutral for investors. The tax system should incentive the development of new business and the creation of value, and obviously allowing the government to collect. The issue is that when the Chilean IRS needs to work with 6 or 7 different regimes, auditing becomes quite hard, and the amount of manpower that they need to invest is huge. So it doesn't work for anyone.
Well, that's a really interesting point, because I was thinking about what it means for taxpayers, but of course for the tax authority, it's really complicated too.
Yeah, totally. At the end, a good system, a system that is thought for the next 40 years, is not only good for investors, it's not only good for the market, but also for the regulators. Because they also know what they're doing, they also know the rules. If a regulator needs, let's say, there's a tax reform, they need to issue the rulings to see how they become effective. And it has different, as I mentioned, different period when it becomes effective. And they work really hard to get a ruling out because it's really complex. And 6 or 7 months afterwards, there is a new tax reform repealing that regulation. All that time was lost. And that time could have been properly invested in auditing, in creating new regulation, in updating our invoicing system, making everything even better and more automatized. So yeah, it doesn't help anyone.
So that was looking backwards. So now let's, Antonio, crystal ball gazing. I'm not going to hold you to this because no one knows what the future holds, but where do you think this is going next?
I'm hopeful. The government, after this bill I mentioned was not accepted by Congress, was rejected, they have decided to sort of get along what they call a fiscal pact. So they're talking with different areas of the aisle, from right to left, but also with entrepreneurs, with family offices. They're trying to capture the opinion of different parties, and we're expecting that on March they will file a next bill for tax reform that hopefully will be thinking of the next 30 years. And there's some good headlines coming ahead, because they mentioned that they're not only thinking of the tax reform in terms of collection, but also on how they're going to incentive investments, which is something good for a country that has been growing close to 0.2% for the last 3 to 4 years. What was said with the COVID that was a section. But I'm hopeful, but at the end, who knows?
Wait to see.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what we know is March is not that far away.
Yeah.
So we'll know soon enough, and I'm sure you're going to be in high demand when that happens.
We'll be there.
Well, Antonio, this has been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you. Very interesting to hear about just the progression that Chile has gone through and is going to go through this year. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.